Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to Politics and Prose at Union Market. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of the bookstore, along with my wife, Lissa Muscatine, and we couldn't be more thrilled to be hosting Patricia Coral, because Patricia used to lead events at Politics and Prose. She was extremely good at it, and we continue to miss her very, very much. Now, as many of you may know, Patricia was born and raised in Puerto Rico and worked there for a while as a high school teacher and education consultant. She moved to Texas about a decade ago and taught there for a bit, then worked for a couple of nonprofit arts organizations. She arrived in Washington several years ago to earn an MFA in creative writing at American University. It's the AU contingent. And then she joined P&P in the spring of 2022, and that was a critical time for us because we were facing the daunting challenge of rebuilding our in-person events programming in the aftermath of the pandemic. We'd gone all virtual for 2 years during the pandemic, and just when Patricia came, we gave her the task of, all right, let's get us going back and to in-person events. A lot of people didn't remember how to do it. They weren't even around when we did have in-person events. So not only was Patricia able to get things going again and build the staff back up, but she won over many of her P&P colleagues with her enthusiasm and engaging personality, and it seems like half the other store is here tonight attending this event. She left P&P, sadly, a year ago to return to the nonprofit world and work with a foundation dedicated to family engagement and education in her beloved Puerto Rico. All the while, though, Patricia has been writing some poetry and creative nonfiction, contributing to a number of publications. In her memoir, Women Surrounded by Water, she stops short of recounting her accomplishments since moving to Texas. The focus is on her coming-of-age struggles against the backdrop of the struggles of older generations of women in her family and a Puerto Rico beset on occasion by hurricanes. Patricia's childhood was marked by some family business problems, parental tensions, and a traditional view of women as destined for lives of domesticity. At age 25, Patricia did marry, but the marriage soon unraveled amid her husband's alcohol and drug problems. She was 29 when, feeling distraught at having falling short of expectations, she left Puerto Rico for Houston in search of a better or different life. But she writes how wrenching it was when in 2017 she watched from afar as Hurricane Maria ravaged Puerto Rico. Her book, which is a mix of longer and shorter prose passages and occasional poetry, is quite emotive and lyrical. At times it's achingly tragic and mournful, but at other times it strikes a kind of triumphant and hopeful voice. It's truly a deeply affecting work that I think will leave readers admiring Patricia and cheering her on. Now, in conversation with Patricia will be another author and someone else who's done a lot to shape P&P's events over the years is Susan Coll. Susan, in fact, was the first person that Lissa and I hired when we assumed ownership of Politics and Prose 13 years ago. During her first 5 years on the staff, Susan vastly expanded and improved P&P's events and other programming. Then she left to focus on her writing, teaching, and other work. But she returned a couple of years ago, just at the time that we hired Patricia. Susan came back to assist Patricia and the rest of the events team in reviving P&P's in-person talks. And she continues to serve as an advisor on the events staff. She's also written 7 novels, developing a distinctive voice that's often relatable, quirky, amusing, and warm-hearted. Her latest book, Real Life and Other Fictions, was published earlier this year. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Patricia Coral and Susan Coll.
Well, thank you, Brad, for that great introduction, and hello, everyone. And I'm so honored to be in conversation with Patricia. As Brad mentioned, we've worked together and became fast friends, and almost from, well, when we first started working together, Patricia was finishing the MFA program, so she was talking a lot about this book in progress, and it's kind of amazing to be here tonight.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you, everyone, for being here, and Brad as well. I'm very excited to see so many people that I love sitting here, and also Susan, who has been such a friend and mentor to me. Thank you. And thank you for tolerating, since I'm writing the book, talking about it, trying to publish it, and now it's here. It takes love to befriend a writer.
Well, I want to actually begin there, because when you first were telling me about this book, you had a lot of interest right away. It won a prize at American University. Tell us the name of the prize.
The Myra Sklar Award.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing, but yes.
So, it was already getting attention. And I know you talked to different people in publishing, and a lot of them were suggesting that you take this material and put it into a more traditional narrative form. And I really admired the fact that you knew what you wanted to do with this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yes. So this memoir is more fragmented. It could be considered hybrid, even though I don't necessarily describe it that way. I just call it a memoir. I felt the type of stories that I was writing here, they needed to be written in this way. I think this is the way that memory operates. This is the way that even trauma writing, like our memories, and I feel like traditional literary genres were too constraining for the stories that I wanted to write. And even though when I was initially writing it, I tried to make it fit within the traditional genres, I felt like I was betraying the stories. As you know, I come from a colonized island, Puerto Rico, and I think one of the things that I realized is like I should be honest, and I should write these stories in the most authentic way that I can write them, and I think I should let the stories tell me how to write them. And I ultimately decided through my writing is an area that I won't allow colonization in my life. So I just decided this is what it is. I'm already constrained by so many political and other situations. And I decided I will just let my writing be. And as Susan said, there was interest. Different agents were like, oh, this piece is amazing. Can we make it like less fragmented, more narrative? And I felt, no, I'm okay. I will find the way, the space, the place that it needs to be, but it has to exist in the way that it should exist.
Yeah, and it's not just that the prose and poetry. It's like a Rauschenberg. There's so much going on here. You have there's some graphic elements that I'll draw your attention to in a bit, but also the mix of Spanish and English. Mm-hmm. You've got prayer in there. It's really a remarkable hybrid. And it begins with a trigger warning, but not the kind of trigger warning you expect. So I thought you could read that.
I'll share the trigger warning before we go into further conversation. Trigger warning. Should I say trigger warning? Should I type now trigger warning? Do I know what your trigger is? My triggers were hearing sounds of doors opening, a locked restroom door, a shower taking too long. My triggers are phone calls from the island in the middle of the night. How do we name triggers? Should I stop writing about doors, locks, and showers? Trigger warning alcohol, trigger warning drugs, trigger warning blood, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. You might find here triggers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the writing is so beautiful. It's a challenge to think about how to talk about the book, because really what you need to do is read the book. But that said, I think let's begin sort of backwards and talk about the hurricane. Hurricane Maria is a big section of the book, and the way you begin describing it before the hurricane hits is almost like a snow day. Just the kind of being off school and the community gathering. Why don't you read a little bit about that from, our pages are off from the galley,
Yes,
but yeah.
I will start. Before I start reading, I need to thank Melissa because the first place that this story was published was in Grace and Gravity, so thank you for the work you do. Okay, the storms hit. I grew up loving hurricanes. In my Caribbean childhood, hurricanes meant days off from school, playing with friends under the rain, and hearing neighbors making jokes to each other. Hurricanes were the sound of their laughter. They meant people cooking sancocho and sharing chocolate cortés with crackers and queso de papa. It was calling everyone to make sure they were okay and had everything they needed. It was watching green palm trees dancing with the wind. It was lighting a few candles when power was out and playing Monopoly or singing to the sound of my dad's guitar and my mom's voice. Hurricanes meant quality time with family and friends. In our concrete houses, hurricanes couldn't harm us. We were home and we were safe. This hurricane is bigger than the island. It should hit Jaucoa around 6 a.m., and there are rumors people will lose their cell phone signals. My mom plans to change her voicemail message every day with an update on how they're doing. She heard in the news that they won't lose access to the voicemail and people will be able to check their messages. I am not on the island, but I don't think that's possible. I keep calling her and waking her up throughout the night to check on them. I ask if they're scared, if they can hear the winds, if it's raining. The truth is, I have nothing to say. It's the first time that the island awaits awaits a Category 5 hurricane, and I'm in Houston. I call for the third time at 3 a.m. The power is out, she tells me. But it's not hot here because it started raining, so we're sleeping well, she says. I stay quiet. She reassures me that they'll be okay, but another truth is that she does not know. Please take care and don't go out. Stay away from the windows. I'll keep calling you until there is no signal. I tell her instead of saying, please don't die, or I'm afraid this could be our last conversation, or I'm sorry for not being there, or I'm sorry for moving away from the island. We hang up, and I start scrolling for news on my phone. The hurricane gets closer. Noticentro promises to be on air with news coverage for the next 24 hours. I feel relieved. I lie on my couch with my laptop to stream the broadcast and check the hurricane on the radar. I feel like a small god watching over them. I wake gasping for air. I am still on the couch and it's 5:22 a.m. I see on my screen that the Noticentro live stream has gone black. I call my mom again. Please, please answer. God, please, please let me talk to them. Hi, this is the Ortega family. It's the first day of the hurricane. We're okay and we're safe. God bless you. I dial over and over again until my hope shrinks. I try to find news on my phone, my laptop, through friends, a short video on Facebook. A man in Tuabaja is on the porch of the second floor of his concrete house. This is like nothing we've ever seen before. This is the highest we can go in the house, he says. He points with a flashlight to the street. Currents of muddy water are invading his house. The video image shakes. The wind nearly rips off his clothes. His daughter starts screaming before dawn. My friends from La Diaspora post social media statuses asking for prayers in English. We're the only ones left to play in Spanish. Por favor, Dios, por favor, por favor, por favor. We've lost our words. I text my friend Anna in Boston. Have you talked to your mom? I have no news from my family. She answers. Last time I talked to her, she was locked inside of the bathroom with her dogs. She thought the wind will rip off the windows. I can't talk now. I just can't. We're waiting for the sun. It's noon in Houston. My body glued to the couch, my laptop resting on my lap, my right hand clicking on the mouse frantically to refresh Noticentro's webpage. Nothing. I switch to Facebook. My screens own me. A high-rise lost its wall-to-wall windows and its balconies, wooden houses ripped to pieces. I keep dialing my mom's number and my dad's and my brother's and my aunts and my grandma's and my uncles and my grandpa's and my cousins. What if this time they answer? It's 3 p.m. in Houston. Noticentro is still down. Laura Monzon, the meteorologist, live streams on Facebook using her cell phone. A faint trail of mascara traces her jawline. Her eyes are wide open as if she witnessed a homicide. She talks to us, the Puerto Ricans in the diaspora. We need to be patient, stay outside of the island. There is no communication with any major. The states of the cities and towns is unknown. They're fine, I tell myself. They're fine. Have you talked to your parents? Are they okay? I worry about the rain and a text message from my mom's cousin in San Antonio. Have you talked to your parents? Are they okay? I worry about the rain and the flooding. I don't answer. She adds, at least they're all together in the house. It never occurred to me that if I'd lost them, I lost them all.
Yeah, that last line is very powerful. Can you talk a little bit more about what that was like during the hurricane, and also, I don't know how political you want to get, but what it was like to watch the reaction of a certain president to that?
Yes, so the hurricane experience, it was the first time for us, at least the people that were alive at that moment. I mean, in Puerto Rico, we've had Category 5 hurricanes, but let's say 100 years before. So it was not something that we knew what was going to happen or how it was going to work. And I was here, I was in Houston, I was the only person of my family that was not in the island, and at that moment also the only person all my friends were in the island. I was talking like a week ago, and trying to find my family was very difficult, not knowing anything about them. And I was mentioning today actually to my dad that a week ago I was talking that the hardest part of the hurricane is like that was what made me diaspora. Before the hurricane, I felt I was a Puerto Rican living outside of the island, but I was a part of the island. I'm just here temporarily. But the hurricane was such a powerful, transformative experience for all Puerto Ricans that I was not a part of. So first was all the not being able to find my family, not knowing if they are alive. But then once I know they were alive, they all could talk about how the island looked the other day. And they all said, there is no green left. It looks like someone dropped a bomb and all the trees are burned. And they were talking, oh my God, that sound of the wind, it cannot get it out of my head. The rain was horizontal, it was not coming down vertically. And all of these memories, I'm not a part of. I just learned through their stories. And it was the first time that I felt I was an outsider. I became diaspora because I don't share that collective experience. I don't share that collective memory. But also I couldn't go back to the island for weeks. Like there were no tickets, there was nothing. Like even if I wanted to be a part of it, I was completely excluded from the experience and I couldn't go back. So I would say here again, Maria was a before and after. And in all that time, we are just grieving, suffering. We all thought that the island will never recover, that it was destroyed forever, because we've never witnessed something like that before. And then at that moment, Trump was just saying, you're not a real catastrophe like Katrina. And he was also saying, you're throwing US budget out of whack. And he was also saying, all this, that Puerto Rico has been a success, like the way they have responded. In the meantime, my brother was organizing small brigades of people to go to places where FEMA never made it. And it's like, it's 111 miles per 35. How come, you cannot make it to help the people? I'm sure if you can make it to the other side of the world to drop a bomb, you could come here and help the people. And on top of that, he also prevented help from coming to the island because there were other countries that offered help, support, like they wanted to go and help. But there were some laws and they cannot go to our shores or anything like that, and he didn't change that. Or at the moment it was too late and only for a week, which which ship can come from the other side of the world and in a week be there and then have to leave. So it was very difficult, and that's why it has been so enraging to hear him or his campaign again saying that Puerto Rico is a floating island of trash or whatever, because it's the same rhetoric of we don't care how many people died there. And eventually more than 4,000 people died. So I blame it, and I hold him absolutely responsible for all the people that died in my country, of deaths that could have been prevented. When the hurricane left, we only had 16 people that died. What happened after and his lack of support killed the other 4,000.
And you describe a real sense of community here as well, the descriptions talk a little bit about your sending. I was really struck by the sending 2 boxes in case one didn't make it.
I think there were good things. I don't want a hurricane to happen again, but there were many good things. I think the most important thing is like how the community came together and people discovered that we have each other. And as long as we have each other and we are community-oriented, we can survive anything. So that part was beautiful. And I feel from the diaspora, we tried to be there as much as we could. And then we even saw like tutorials, like if you take like a flat rate box from USPS, how many things you can make fit, and what you can send and all of that. So I think the diaspora was just desperate because we couldn't go there. The help was not arriving. All the containers were pretty much, I don't know how to say the word, but it's like FEMA took over all the containers and everything, so the help couldn't come, but also they were not doing their job. So we were pretty much held hostage in a little bit. But then I feel the strength that came from the community and the way that the community, people that didn't have electricity on their own houses, they still went to more remote areas with food and water for those other people, while they were also not having electricity or water or things. So I think overall, that was the beautiful part. I think we really grew. We've always been community oriented, but I think now, like that notion of, you know what, we cannot count on the federal government, we cannot count on the local government, but we have each other. And if we come together, we can just literally help each other survive.
Well, and what's remarkable about that in your book is that you render all of this like as poetry of, the poetry of getting batteries and putting them in UPS boxes or USPS boxes. So, and so back to that, talking about the form a little bit. I mean, you're covering some very, very difficult emotional territory here, which I really admire your cojones in writing about some difficult things, and yet some of it is even so difficult that my pages are different, but if you can see on roughly page 38, but in the finished copy it's a different page. But can you talk a little bit about the box? And
Yes.
Yes.
So there is I'm narrating, or I'm going through different memories at some point, memories that were very difficult, and then at some point I just drew a box, and I decided I'm not going to keep going and talking about it. And that was actually, I was working on this initially on a journal, and it was literally, I'm thinking, okay, I have all these memories that are difficult, or these life experiences that are difficult. Which are the ones that I'm obsessing about? And then I just kept writing them, almost like an archive of memories that are difficult and I'm obsessing about. And then at some point, it kept going, and I was like, I don't think I want to write about these other things. And I just drew a box on the page, at that moment, handwriting, and I decided, you know what, like, consider them written here. And it was, in a way, I feel, as a writer, I released myself from writing the things I didn't want to write about, or I don't believe that we have to re-traumatize ourselves for writing. I think you can share the things that are not harming you, or you can even share the things that harm you after they have no power over you. That's how I see it, because I think we don't have to re-experience difficult things twice necessarily. So it was like a way, I guess, like in a way I've released those stories by deciding I'm not writing about them, but also like as a writer, but also I felt, you know what, also whomever reads this don't need to have access to these stories either. So yeah, that was where the box came, and it was like one topic for debate. Like, I think at some point my editor was like, well, what if you, instead of the box, put like a few blank pages and all of that? And I was like, you know what, like, I know there are other ways, but I feel this was the most authentic way, because it was actually, I was not trying to be cool or do something different. It literally was in my handwritten journal, that box. And I felt like it was the most honest and authentic way of having it also showing in the page on the book.
Well, in that spirit, would you want to talk about your experience with your late ex-husband, or leave it on the page? Because we can do either.
I can talk a little bit. And then you guys have to buy the book and read it. Yes, I think, so I had, when I was 17, I started in a relationship with the person that was my best friend. And at that moment, he was my best friend, and, well, it's the first love, right? But eventually he had issues with addiction. He was a musician, and there were many layers. He was an amazing person, and I know sometimes we write, I think my concern when we write this type of stories is like, I don't want for people to think these people are flat. Like, these people were amazing people as well. And at the same time, like, everything in life is nuanced. And for the purpose of book, of course, I think you have to tell the story in the way that it will make sense for the book, but that's not the whole story. So he was a very sweet person with a lot of internal demons, let's say. But yes, then when we were married, he had addiction issues, and then eventually we got divorced when I was 29. So the first section of the book explores this idea of failed domestic projects or domestic projects that are difficult, and the things, well, you will read it, but yes. So I think a big part of the book, I would say, is that relationship with this person that I very much loved, and I still do in a different way, more like a family way. So yes, I don't know if I'm.
And this book is also a tribute to women and the women of your family, some of whom are here. Your mother's here, your abuela's here,
Yeah.
your father's here as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
that?
Yeah, I am who I am because of my family, and I owe them everything. I think we cannot, I don't believe in such a thing as self-made. I think I am myself, I'm whoever came before me. And I think from the woman in my family, actually the book is dedicated to the woman who made me. These were the women that, through the things that they taught me, and also the unspoken things, like eventually I was able to discover who I am as a person and determine who I wanted to be as a person. But I think if I can describe the women in my family, I would say they are the strongest love you can feel, and at the same time, the strongest woman. And I worry that sometimes, people miss like the cultural nuances that are in this type of stories. And what I try to convey all the time is like how strong they were and all the things they endured and lived through, and still they were not complaining about. It's like, let's keep going. We're strong. We got this. And I sometimes wish I was as strong as them. I think sometimes I feel I am strong, but then other times I feel no. I still have some path to walk before I come to be that strong. So. Mami y abuela la amo y son las mujeres de mi vida.
Well, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. So.
Well, if you met them.
Right. This book is also about colonization, and how has that influenced you as a person and a writer growing up in Puerto Rico?
Yes, I think it has so many things about colonization. We don't realize that they're actually affecting us in our daily lives. So I think it's very hidden. But I think when I was able to step out and see things a little bit differently, like from a distance, and explore, okay, the life that I was supposed to live in the traditional way didn't work out. So now what I do and who I am as a person. And then I realized, like, there's so many things that our colonization, like, really affects us in the way we see things. And I think I want to read a little bit. I'm going to read this and then I'll finish. Just let me just look for it if I can. This was not planned, as you can see. Okay. I must say that in our head, Puerto Rico is a woman. We have this idea of Puerto Rico as a woman. La isla. The motherland has never been a free country. How do you learn to be free if you've never seen freedom? How do you learn as a woman born in an enslaved island to be independent, to free yourself when your own country hasn't been able to? I left behind my mother, daring to live a life better than hers. How does a colonized woman dare aim for freedom? I was born and raised to fear being left or abandoned. Any day the US can get tired of us and leave us to our own luck, they always told us. We've never been sure of our relationships. Estado Libre Asociado, translated, it doesn't have the same meaning. Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. the colonialism is disguised. Then you go through life and you don't mind relationships that have no definition. You're used to be owned without expecting anything in return. You're used to needing your owner. You need to be owned. You're afraid to stand on your own feet, independent. If you're independent, you could be persecuted, end up in jail, you could get killed. Because if you want to be independent, you'll be part of a shamed minority. You have to become small because the smallest island from the greater Antilles is Puerto Rico. Look how small we are. Our geography teachers always taught us when they pointed to the map. And there you are with the irreverence of trying to be big. You have to unlearn that you cannot make it by yourself. They always told you the island can't make it by itself. You are a woman and you're an island. So I think that's the only way I can answer that question. And then when I moved, I never thought I will be in the US. I will never thought, I'm pro freedom. So I never thought I will come to the country of my colonizers. And even more, I never thought I will write in the language of my colonizer. And yes, we can argue Spanish is also a colonizing language. The difference is like Spanish is still in our blood. We mixed with it. But English, we don't have that DNA. It's like an external imposition. And then I struggled because I felt if I started to write in English, I will be betraying all the history of resistance in Puerto Rico to English language, which is a lot. And then a friend told me, you know what? There is this author that I don't remember who it was. And she says that she used the colonizers' language to speak against them. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, we're going to move to your questions in just a minute. Would you like to read any more? Or
I think we've
Okay.
read, yes.
Well, just, I know you currently work for an organization that funds artists in Puerto Rico. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the art world there and here as well?
Yes, I think Puerto Rico is a very vibrant country with a lot of artists. I think art is part of our daily life. We just don't necessarily call it art. But yes, I'm excited that where I am now, we can really support artists in the island, especially after Hurricane Maria. And if you've heard about lateHUSBAND, it's a fellowship for authors in Puerto Rico. So we're supporting writers in Puerto Rico. And it's beautiful to be able to see how after the hurricane, after we thought everything was destroyed, actually so many beautiful things have come out of it. It has been, I remember taking a class on dystopian and apocalyptic literature, and my professor said, you know what, apocalypse is never the end. There's always a beginning after. So it's beautiful to see that beginning in Puerto Rico for the past few years. Yes, there are many struggles, but I think people are very creative and the arts are flourishing.
And here, is there a big diasporic community, arts community?
So here, I think it's more like a melting pot. I have amazing community from Latina writers. I have amazing communities from DC people, from others. I think I haven't found too many Puerto Ricans here, are in the arts. Maybe soon, hopefully. I found a few, but not necessarily a strong community. However, I think after the hurricane happened, the diaspora became an island outside of the island. So I am very much connected to other writers from the diaspora that are in Puerto Rico. And we share that common ground of being part of the diaspora and at the same time being absolutely in love and wanting many things for Puerto Rico. So it's more an online thing, I guess.
All right, well, do we have any questions here? I think we've got a microphone coming your way.
Thank you. Hi, Patricia.
Hello.
So I guess my question is, a lot of people here, as well as myself, are with you in the AU MFA program. And so I've read little snippets of this and just breezing through and seeing what you kept as prose or poetry. I guess my question is, even knowing your hesitations before even taking it to an editor after workshopping through the program and kind of entering the program with this project in mind. Like, sometimes even as a writer and as a woman, sometimes we write things and, enraged by our society. For whatever reason, we'll write it and we'll walk away and we'll come back and we'll almost be like, sometimes I find myself shocked by like what I've written. That's really aggressive. And having this come through the MFA, through workshops, and then through an editor, were there bits that went through workshop or an editor that people make comments on, but maybe you wrote it in such a heightened moment of emotion where you knew, like even you said this needed to be written in a way that you knew it. And Roland Barthes, in his like Death to the Author, kind of wrote of the author as like a shaman, like the story will come to you in the way it is. Were there parts that people in our workshops or your editor maybe touched and were like, oh, do you want to think about this in a different way, that you were like, no, this is the way it is, and take it as it is or don't?
Yes. Well, thank you for your question. Yes, I think there were different times and different iterations of the work in general. I feel the most important thing for me was staying authentic and committed to what I wanted to share. And once I had that clear, these are non-negotiables for me, I feel like everything else was in a way like easy, because where your boundaries are as a writer, like the things that you really care about. At the same time, when I approached editing, it was very much we're partners on this, and I owe a lot to my editor. I also owe a lot to my writing community. Yes, Peppermints, my friends. They know who they are. But I think yes, my editor and also my writing community, I think people treated mostly the work with a lot of love and care. And I feel people were trying to really suggest how, okay, we can make it better. And there were things that, yes, I'm totally on board with that. And there were things like, no, I really need this to be this way. And I think when I had that clarity, I wouldn't be trade. I guess in a nutshell, I wouldn't betrayed my stories to have a work published. So even in the moments where I could have had it published in other ways, I felt that was not going to be authentic to what I wanted to do. So it's like, I'd rather have 5 people reading it, but it's authentic, than having an actual book published. Yeah. I'm glad now I get to have both, but.
Thank you.
Over here.
I think Melissa does.
Hi, Patricia.
Hello.
You mentioned earlier that the section with the box was from an actual journal entry. So how much of your actual journaling worked into your memoir? How was that process? Because some nonfiction writers will tell you an essay is not a journal entry. So how did you turn those journal entries into your memoir?
Okay. Thank you for the question. I think my main writing practice is journaling. I love writing by hand. It probably is not as productive because then you have to, change it a little bit and all of that. But I think I write because I have so many things in my head and inside of me, and you need somehow to have a container for that. And people that are writers here, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So in a way, you have all these stories, these things that you want to share, and I think journaling is my main practice. And I think most of the things are journal. I don't want anyone to ever read them, right? They're terrible, they're bad, they're, I'm being dramatic, so. But at the same time, I think there are times, I had this mentor that once told me, look where there is heat. She used that term, heat. And sometimes I'm writing about something in my journal, and I felt like, oh, this is actually potentially more than just a journal entry. This can be I think this can be taken out and probably became a piece, because I feel there's heat there. So I think to your question, two-part question, I think many things that are here were in my journal. And I think eventually I just decided, okay, I think these pieces potentially can become something else. And then I see it through those eyes, how can I improve it to, have public reading it versus just my journal. But yeah, I think it's a combination. It doesn't mean that I don't journal just to be, cathartic. I journal because it's the way I process life. So it's just I'm thinking on the page, and then some thoughts are better than others, and those thoughts can make it. You can work it and make it on a book. So thank you.
What was one of the hardest things about writing this book?
I think the hardest part was, writing it was kind of overall good, the process of writing it. I think I enjoyed many things, and, besides the existential crisis here and there, because when you're writing, you think, I will never make it, no one will read it. So those dramas were there, so that part was suffering. But then the other side, I actually enjoy the process. The hardest part is realizing oh my God, people are actually going to read this. So I think for the past 6 months, that has been keeping me awake. You can ask my therapist. It has been tough. But because when it's on the page, I feel I'm so emotionally removed from those stories. I treat them already like they're a piece of writing, a piece of literature. So I forget it's my own life. So then I'm just enjoying the writing process. And when it's coming out and then you're labeling it memoir, then it's difficult because people are going to read it oh, this is your life. The hardest part for me has been thinking, are these stories going to be, am I being fair to these stories? And are these stories going to be understood the way I wanted for them to be understood? Are all the complexities that I try to present here, are people going to understand that? And also the fact that I chose to be a writer, but none of the people I love chose to be a writer. So in a way, that hope of, I'm just sharing these stories. This is not all our story, but I don't want to hurt anyone around me by they don't understanding really what I was trying to do as a writer. So I guess the ethics around the people you love, and then the fear of having so many stories out there. Thank you.
Patricia.
Melissa.
Patricia. What an honor to gather here and see you as an author, as a writer, as a community member, as a daughter, as a person who has built and contributed. And it's just truly an honor to see you as a human tonight. And that's what everyone's here for, to see you, right? I have 2 questions, 2 assignments for you. The first is as a person who writes as someone who feels othered, right? Someone who is outside. And I'm thinking of that because I'm sitting here next to Donna, and I know Joy Castro has been such a huge influence. And I'm curious about your influences. And then the second part of my assignment is, as your professors, we would like to know what you're working on now. Sandra was texting me asking what your next due date is. So 2-part. Good luck.
Well, first, thank you for being here. These are my professors that I love, and they have been amazing to me, beyond their role. So many things I wouldn't have accomplished without them. So thank you both for being here. So I think I'm so distracted about the excitement that you're here that I forgot the first part of it. Influences. I think, yes, for sure. I think definitely when I was in Puerto Rico, my first influence was Mayra Santos Febres. I think she had this way of just putting on the page things that were going to shock everyone. So I feel the way that she was fearless on the page, it's something that I admire and I love about Mayra Santos Febres, my favorite Puerto Rican author. Also, I love the way that she is completely involved in the community and activism. So I believe strongly in writers that work on their work, but also are a part of the community, because I think personally, I feel that goes hand in hand. And I think she does not divorce both. I think she has a strong practice as a person that is a builder of other writers or community or activism, and at the same time has amazing writing. So that was my first influence. And it's a woman, and it's a Black woman, so, you know, I love her, I adore her. And I was lucky that she's also one of my mentors, so eventually I had that luck. And I think definitely when I moved to Puerto Rico, when I moved to Houston, it was, you know, after I divorced and trying to figure out what do you next when the plot that people always taught you how life should be didn't work. I found a lot of Latina authors that I didn't know before, because I used to be reading in Spanish in literature. My master's is in Spanish literature and linguistics. So I didn't know much the work of, you know, Sandra Cisneros, Julia Alvarez, like all the first Latina writers, right? And I think finding them and also finding how they were trying to find a path for themselves as women that are not married, that don't have kids, or that, yes, are married, but they were divorced and all of that. Like, in a way, they were challenging the tradition and also fighting to be writers. I think those two things were very important to me at the beginning, at those early stages of who I am and where I'm going. So yes, then I've had many others after, and professors and people I love and mentors. What I'm writing now, I'm writing on many things. I'm working on many things, but I'm actually working on writing pieces around living in translation. And it was born as an idea on David's class, and I think definitely that's one project that I'm writing, like that experience of living in translation. It's more complex than that, but I don't want to jinx it. But thank you.
Do you see your next project being in this form or something of a pedestrian narrative nature?
I think this is just very natural to me. I'm not sure how it's going to be, but so far it seems like it's pretty much like this form. I think it's the way, I don't know, the way my head operates, the way like my stories that I tell, so I feel like I think it's going to be the same way. I think I have a hard time with like more traditional narratives, and I'm not sure even if I will be good at it. So I think it's the most authentic way for me. I don't say that this will be the only way. I also wonder how it will be if I go back to writing in Spanish, how different it will be from now writing in English. But yeah, I think probably it will be similar. It's what I feel. I think this is the way I think. My head goes from one thing to another place. So when you see this, you're a little bit inside of my head.
Patri.
Yeah.
Hey, estamos bien orgullosos de ti. So my question is about how do you find balance? Speaking of how difficult your relationship was, and talking about family and all the stuff that happened in Puerto Rico, but how do you write about this, but also have the balance of also being hopeful?
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm too hopeful for my own good. So I think even in difficult times, yes, I can spend some time thinking, oh my God, this is a disaster and it's the end of the world. But I think relatively quickly, I go to a very hopeful side. And I think even in difficult things, I feel like still there is hope, in the book, I feel. But I think the balance is just the authentic part. I think I'm repeating authenticity too much, but I just feel it's that. I feel eventually I'm just writing things in the most honest way that I can. That doesn't mean that it's the truth. That's the different thing, I feel. But I feel it for me, and my experience is honest, and I try to balance in ways of, regardless of how honest this is, how can I still protect, the people I love
Yeah, right here.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Patricia. Hola, ¿cómo estás? I'm a big fan. I love your pieces. I feel like it just packs so much into like accessible language too, which I think is just so beautiful and telling. And since we're on 2 questions, I'm also going to ask 2 questions too. The first is I'm always curious if there's a certain line in your book that just hits you every time, like when you read it or whatever, and if you could share it, it's just like, oh, it brings you so much emotion or joy or just whatever. And the second is, I feel like a lot of times we use stories to teach lessons, and I was wondering if there was a lesson that you learned while writing these stories for me.
Interesting. Yes, I think there are many lines that really hit me. I think definitely, let me see if I can see one here. I think let's just go to the ones that I read, but I think that you're a woman and you're an island. Somehow, even though I've read that piece many times and I've processed it many times, it still feels like a punch to me, like you have to learn that the island won't make it by itself, and then all of that, and then you're a woman and you're an island, like that always hits very hard. When I finally process that line, I will go back to you and, and tell you what my conclusions on that is. And then the second part, things that I've learned. So this is very interesting. I was writing, I was in a workshop with Mayra Santos Febres, the author that I said that I love, and we were talking a lot about ancestors and all of that. And then one night, I was looking through, my life and all of that, and writing about ancestors, and I was mostly thinking of me and some of them. But then I have this grandma that passed away, and I had a dream with her. And she told me, like, Padre, I'm trying to call you, but I don't have your number. And at that moment, I changed my Puerto Rican number to a DC number. And I told that to Mayra, and because she's so amazing, she told me, I knew it, but also she reaffirmed, she wants you to take a closer look to her life. And then when I was taking a closer look to her life, I saw her as a grandchild, as, she was always with a lot of grandkids and just very busy doing house stuff. And then through this paying a closer look, it's like, actually, she lived in many countries. Actually, she had all this life that was very different. But then I just knew this other side of her life. And I think one of the things that I learned working on this is like, my grandma was very, very, very strong, even though I didn't necessarily see that before, because I only saw the gender and I only saw the traditional woman, but she was actually amazing. And I have a lot of her in me too. I always knew that I had a lot of my grandma that is still very much alive and strong. I feel she and I are like soul sisters, but I think I always forgot that I have this other grandma that I carry a lot of her within me. Thank you.
Well, I think we need to leave time for you to sign all of these books, but thank you all for coming out. We have books behind the register, and if you don't mind just folding your chairs up, and then Patricia will be right here. So thank you.
Thank you for being here.